Sound check. Can people hear me?
Welcome to the regular council meeting, June 22nd, 2023. And I'd like to start by acknowledging we're holding this meeting on the traditional territories of the Tla'amin Nation. Item number 1 is the meeting announcements. And I would just like to start by thanking interim CAO Tom Day and his staff for doing a great job in bringing us into 2023 in terms of procedures and the way we conduct business. This is as a result of work that we did under the guidance of George Cuff and Ms. Lawrenson, and I think it's a really good job. One thing I'll just point out, the last item is questions, and it probably will be a fairly long meeting. So the advice that we got from George Cuff and others is if we could ask people to minimize the preamble and just ask a question. And if the question has been asked before, just out of courtesy to the person that asked it, if you would not repeat it. So thank you very much. And we'll start now with announcements. We'll start with Councillor Almeida.
All right, thank you very much. I get to kick it off. We are in the middle of our Prisma Festival right now, so I'll just mention that right now. We've had a great crowd and great show, and a couple more days left. There's a concert that's about to start in about half an hour, another one tomorrow night, and Friday is our conclusion. So if you haven't got tickets yet, be sure to check it out. There's also daytime events that you can look at as well. And then just around the corner at the beginning of July is our Cathalmu Choral Festival as well, July 4th to 8th. I think there's probably still opportunities to volunteer or be a host for some of the participants there as well. So reach out to the Academy of Music if you're available. And then since our next council meeting is in middle of July, I'll mention that Logger Sports is happening in the middle of July as well. So we got a busy few events coming up in the next 4 weeks.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you. A couple events next Wednesday I wanted to bring up. A couple of events are hosted at the library. So from 1 to 4, there is a Randy Timothy is hosting a workshop on the Ayajutham language. That's the language of Tla'amin Nation and its sister nations. And then after that at 4 p.m., there is an accessibility open house, which is being put on by, I think it's specifically the regional district, but it touches on the regional district, the city, and the library, and possible accessibility improvements that could be made. So if accessibility is important to you and your family, I would suggest coming out to that. And I'll stop there. Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Doudt.
No announcements tonight.
Councillor Palm.
Thank you, Your Worship. For the chair, I have just one announcement. That's not a great announcement. It's just the state of our BC ferries coming and going from this community. Being on the Ferry Advisory Committee here locally, there's a great deal of frustration the way sailings are being canceled at the present time. And I just want the public to be aware that what has been happening is on the higher end of the staffing, whether engineer, captain, or whatever it may be, if that person is sick and doesn't show up for work and they haven't got a replacement, unfortunately that boat cannot sail. And just to give you an example, if the busy run in Duke Point or Nanaimo is without an engineer, well, they find one. And that's usually, or it could be, out of Comox, and our ferry doesn't sail. That's what's been happening. So it's not great. I've traveled twice in the last month to Vancouver and been at the ferry an hour ahead of time coming out of Vancouver and had to wait for the second ferry. So there's a great deal of frustration, and if you haven't noticed, The amount of traveling people are doing these days have put a great burden on those ships and the transportation routes. So make sure you check websites, make sure you plan ahead. And if you can get a reservation, I would advise you to do so. So I'll just leave it at that. We are working on that. We are communicating, but this isn't an easy fix. So we're sorry for any inconvenience. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Elliott,
Hi, can people hear me?
you can.
Oh, perfect. So I'm in sunny Vancouver today. I got to listen to Dr. Bonnie Henry this morning. She opened up our Local Leaders United conference for learning about harm reduction tools and the community action services BC-wide. So they support community action teams, which we have one in our town as well. And so we had a full day of discussions between local governments, practitioners, and people who are supporting the opioid crisis throughout the province. It's been very interesting. We'll be finishing up around noon tomorrow. I'm booked on Harbour Air, which works really, really well if your meetings are in downtown Vancouver, and it bypasses the ferry problems. So I was very grateful for that. And I'll be home tomorrow.
Thank you. Councillor Southcott.
Nothing from me, thank you, Your Worship.
And I'm just going to briefly comment on Prisma because I was fortunate enough to be invited by the Prisma organization to open one of their meetings and to attend a number of their activities. And just on a personal note, I have two of the students staying at my place and their grandparents, one of which I started grade 1 in a few years ago. So it's been a wonderful experience going out and seeing the energy of these young people, but also talking with so many people that are discovering Powell River. And they all say the same thing. Wow, what a place to live. So we'll now move on to the adoption of the agenda. Staff, do we have any changes to the agenda?
Your Worship, the only thing to mention is there is a late submission from the delegation, Mr. Chris Carnell, that was circulated to council, and if you'd like, it's not an attachment to the a new item, but it is an attachment for that item. If you'd like to just formally receive that, please.
Thank you. Could we have a move for the adoption of the, yes, moved. Do we have a seconder? And thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Passed unanimously. Item 3 is the adoption of the minutes. 3.1 is the minutes of the regular council meeting held June 1, 2023. Do we have a moved by and seconded? Any discussion? All in favor? Passed unanimously. 3.2 is the minutes of the special council meeting held June the 8th, 2023.
Move adoption.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder? Thank you. Any discussion on the special council meeting minutes? No. All in favor of adoption? Passed unanimously. Moving to delegations. We have our first delegation, Chris Carnell with Timberlane Barracks. Welcome.
Before I proceed, if I found an error on my submission, and it's on page 2, second, Paragraph 6, it mentions about the LDE lighting. And it stays in finances under that one, but the next pair down, I also had it in there, so it's a cross off from any grants that we received.
Excuse me, can I get you to point your mic towards your mouth just so everyone can hear you online? Thank you.
Your Worship and Council, thank you for letting me address you tonight. And what I'd like to address on is the taxes that have been imposed on Timberlane Barrack Society when you went and looked at your progressive tax exemptions. Timberlane Barrack Committee is a nonprofit organization who looks after buildings that we do not own. We rent from the city. These buildings, we provide a positive, safe place for the youth who join the cadet movement to learn skills that will carry them on to adulthood. The program promotes values, ethics, development of leadership, citizenship, fitness, balances safety and challenges, and instills confidence, leaving a positive lifelong impact on these young people. Today, the whole cadet program continues to evolve and adapt to meet the expectations of our challenging society today. And although that the program is expected to be physical and mentally challenging, there are no artificial barriers developed which precludes participations based on gender, race, culture, religion, and education, social economic status, or the ability. The program will take all reasonable efforts to accommodate all that wish to try. Cadets are encouraged to become part of teams, and they have a variety of activities that they can choose to include, including orienteering, marksmanships, drill, sailing, regattas, sports, and more. The cadet movement have been here in Powell River. The 22 Red Knight Royal Canadian Air Cadet Corps, 1941. Royal Canadian Sea Cadet Corps, number 64, Malasapina, 1953. 2781 Powell River Army Cadets, 1965. And while the cadet program had been housed since 1965 in Timberlane Barracks. The cadet program is sponsored by the Department of National Defense, and the Department of National Defense pays for the administration to support the program. Finding a place to run the program is up to the community. The rent to the city and the cost of hydro, heating, and internet operation and maintenance is then split between 3 corps, thus paying the Timberlane Barrack Society, which is a combination of people from all 3 corps. The city has no funding budgeted for maintenance of these buildings, and since we've been there, we've accepted that and have taken on the responsibility to look after the buildings that we use. All funds that we use to maintain those buildings in the house are either funds that they've from soliciting other organizations for contribution. The both Royal Canadian Legions help support the cadets. And any major maintenances, we apply for grants. The Timberlane Barrack Society Sponsoring Committee on fundraising on their own have replaced both furnaces twice, and during 2019 upgraded them, and we've upgraded the LDE lighting in the classroom and the drill deck, all being raised funds within house. In the past few years, from grants from Powell River Community Forests, BC Hydro grants, the Rotary Club, the 100+ Women Who Care Powell River chapter, the Royal Canadian Legions 164 and 232 from Texada Island all helped pay the rent, internet, and other costs. Any fund so D&D pays for the administration of the program. And to make it fun, the cadets and the family support groups raise funds for the fun stuff to keep it interesting. All other funds from the program come from raising funds by the cadets and the parents, and those funds stay within the course. It's the fun stuff. Adventure training in the local area, local wall climbing, visits to attractions while they're out and away over in Quadra, visiting the capital, going down to visit the ships on the seaside, Army side, going down to Vancouver. Our cadets are active within the community, serving meals at the Cranberry Senior Center, Quadra Regional District Trash Bash, helping in the Royal Canadian Legion 164 Poppy Campaign and Remembrance Day ceremony, Salvation Army hampers, and the kettle program. And some members of the cadet movement have been on the Student Mayor Council throughout the years. These cadets also assist in programs at the high school, mentoring grade 8s coming into the high school system, the LINK program up at Brooks High School, outreach programs, youth and family programs, and cadets as students. Cadets get credit at the high school level. Well, the budget approximately costs $11,700 to maintain those buildings with heat and the O&M. Furnace repair. We've replaced the roofs just recently. Unfortunately, we were broken into along with other buildings up in that area just recently. We've put the gravel sidewalks in, plumbing repairs. Cadets who go through this program, they become leaders within the community, within the province, at the national level. We've had cadets, Powell River, Senior Captain of the Canadian Coast Guard, Mark Rothwell, just recently retired. 2 Rear Admirals on the sea side, and 1 full Navy captain. There are Air Generals. There are still people from this community that have gone through the cadet programs that are in the military today because they were in cadets. The city's social planning focuses on improving the well-being of all community members, and the cadet program, who uses the Timberlane Barracks, has been housed there since 1965. And adding the stress of having now to pay land taxes on buildings that we rent is not improving the well-being of these future leaders, because we're taking to pay the land taxes that you're asking us to pay. We were granted 86% exempt free, and now that $1,200 that you want in taxes will take money away that would go to looking after either the building or the cadets, because we didn't budget for that. In the last 2 years is when all this came up. By putting the extra strain of having to pay taxes under the permissive tax exemption bylaw 2714 on buildings that Timberlane do not own, will be taking funds away from the cadets. There's a saying that it takes a community to help raise a child, and the youth that you help by reconsidering and ensuring that Timberlane Barrack Society are 100% exempt of land taxes improvement will ensure that the funds that are raised will go to the benefits of the cadets and the improvements that will be needed to keep that place safe for them to be in. And always remember that the individuals who go through this program are potential leaders for our country, our province, to our community. There are members that are sitting on this council today that were in the cadet movement. There are people that are working within the city that were part of the cadet movement. And ensuring that we are taxed, we don't have to worry about the taxes, paying taxes, will ensure that we have people to replace them. Are there any questions you have for me or my delegation?
Councillor Palm.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Carnell, I just want to thank you very much for coming in here tonight. Over the years that I've been involved with this organization and having our various entities come in, I can assure you that they are some of the finest young people that we have met. And in my time in the school system for 38 years, you are absolutely correct. They are role models. They are leaders. They are future leaders. So I thank you very much for coming in here. And it's easy to sit in this seat and put a blanket clause across the board of 86%. But it really helps to see someone like yourself advocate for our youth and come in here and tell us what this is all about and how it affects you. I think council you loud and clear this evening. And I can't, I'm not going to sit here and make any decisions at this point, but I assure you there will be future discussions. We will revisit this blanket clause, and hopefully we can come to a resolution that hopefully puts a smile on your face.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer.
Councillor Siltka.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Cornell, for coming and speaking with us. My own family history with cadets goes way back to my father, basically, and my grandfather also was a serviceman, as was my dad, served during the two Great Wars. Specifically with regard to permissive tax exemptions, this is a subject that came up over an extended period of time. With the last council, there were a number of meetings where we considered it. This community provides one of the largest proportions of permissive tax exemptions in the entire province for a community our size. So the decision at one point was to cap those exemptions at $400,000, which is still a very generous amount of money. They were climbing way beyond even what we could correspond to inflation. So the needs are increasing, but we're aware of that across the board. We know that there is an increasing number in our community, and they're not just homeless people or people of really dire needs. But these are retired people who are having increasing trouble affording the homes they're living in that perhaps they built way back when they were young in the 60s, plus or minus. During the time we looked at permissive tax exemptions in the last term, our last finance officer, Adam Langemeyer, did quite a bit of research on measuring needs and means of organizations applying. And I'm quite convinced that there's a real range of needs and means. I know there are organizations receiving tax exemptions that probably have greater means than any of the cadets or your organization, that umbrella organization looks after them. And I would like to refer this to back to staff. I'd like to move that we refer this issue back to staff to have another look at the work that we had done before to try to put into effect policy that gives greater advantage to organizations that truly do need greater advantage, and so that we have some kind of possibly more complex scale of concessions or tax exemptions, so that organizations like yours that really don't have large fundraising capacity can continue the great work that you do. And yes, at least 2 of members of Cadets have been on our youth council, and they're stellar individuals who are bound for leadership. So if there's a seconder.
Thank you, Councillor Southcott. Is there a seconder?
What's the motion?
The motion is to refer back to staff to consider work previously done on needs and means to facilitate permissive tax exemptions.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Elliott. Discussion, Councillor Doudt.
I'm in favor of this motion.
Thank you.
And if I can speak on it, I'd really like to. As I was a Sea Cadet, I spent as much time as you could in Sea Cadets, and I enjoyed the experience. I learned a lot, and you're absolutely right. It teaches leadership. Puts people in chairs like this, and I admire the program, and I admire the young people who are participating, and maybe even more, I admire the adults who are making it possible for them to go through the program. However, the bylaw you're talking about is not an imposition of taxes. It's a permissive tax exemption bylaw. The city decided, as Councillor Southcott pointed out some time ago, to limit the amount of that to $400,000 a year. And there is a long list of organizations, all of them very worthwhile and very useful in the community, that apply for these. So I'd like to see a thorough report from our staff about the implications that a change for one group would have, because I think if we start doing it for one group, we're going to have a lineup of people who want to do that for their group. So I think would make more sense if we get a report from staff about how to deal with it, why it is the way it is, and we can move forward. But thanks for what you do in Sea Cadets, and I loved my time there. I had a lot of great opportunities to go around the world, actually, and learn a lot of things. So keep up the good work, and I hope this passes and we can think about it some more.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Cornell. I'd like to also have, there were a few things we discussed the last time around, and in the way we came up with this program that we currently have. I believe at the time we thought we could do some improvements to that system, and it was a starting point. I at the time had suggested we tie our caps not as we have a number cap, and I've suggested it be a percentage of overall budget, so it would have a built-in inflationary mechanism, and so I would still like that considered. So our cap on exemption, our permissive tax exemptions would be related to our overall budget and would go up and down along with our overall budgets, and would naturally fit in with inflationary of the times. And I also wanted to have more serious consideration about eligibility for application, because if some types of things are not eligible, that leaves more money for the things that we truly want to support. So I think we need a better definition around what we want to support through permissive tax exemptions to allow room for those types of organizations that are we most want to support in this way. For example, I think we have a lot of social services that are funded by the provincial government that we provide tax exemptions to. And part of what we learned with Adam Langemeyer's explorations was that doesn't necessarily happen in other communities, that the provincial government funds those organizations to cover their taxes in some other communities. So I think it's not something we should be doing. I think we should not be covering permissive tax exemptions on buildings that are delivering provincial services through contract. Things like that. So I would like to see this staff report and some of those things looked at that we intended to look at and haven't quite finished looking at.
Thank you. Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm not actually in support of this motion, but mostly because I don't think it addresses the issue at hand. And I think we also have bigger conversations to have around how the city supports our community organizations. So my understanding, tax deadline is July 4th, and I'm presuming that's true for you as well. Yeah. And so asking for a report back from staff doesn't actually deal with the key
It
issue.
doesn't deal with it this year.
It doesn't deal with it this year. And so I don't, so I mean, I could speak to a different motion in the future, perhaps if there's a space to provide a bit of a delay for the tax deadline, whether that means to raise additional funds to meet the current request or to wait for staff feedback. But I think the motion that Councillor Southcott has made, because it doesn't deal with the issue in front of us right now that we were being asked to deal with, I would be more in favor of a motion, and this might come up maybe during the community forest conversation, about a more wholesale look at how the city supports community organizations through the community forest, through our grants and aid, through permissive tax exemptions, through Arts Council grants, and beyond. So because I think the question is bigger than what Councillor Southcott has brought up, and it also doesn't address the issue that's in front of us today, I'm not going to support the motion.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Passed 5-2, I believe. That noted. Thank you. Mr. Carnell, thank you very much. I've had the privilege of attending a number of your functions and meeting the individuals. And what I'd like to do is, if you're available early next week, we can have a follow-up meeting with you to address the issue at hand. And with Councillor Southcott's motion, it'll be something which will take care of the following year. But if you're available, we can make that arrangements.
I will not be available, but I'm sure Mr. Bartley will be. I'm headed east to see grandbabies.
Okay, I'll make arrangements with Mr. Bartley to meet. Thank you.
I thank the council, worship.
We have the next are reports. Reports 8.1 is the Spring 2023 Powell River Community Forest Grant recommendation. Do we have?
Your Worship, there's no presentation this evening. The letter from the Community Forest Board is on the agenda and it's for council consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Doat.
Mr. Mayor, I would move. The council approve $3,504,396.53 to be granted from the Powell River Community Forest Reserve Fund and distributed to the following organizations: the City of Powell River Recreational Complex Pool Roof Replacement, $2.8 million. Townsite Actors Guild Show Computer and Sound/Lighting Software, $3,877.77. Thet Parks and Wilderness Society top-up grant to complete remaining outhouse replacements on the Sunshine Coast Trail, $18,000. Powell River Salmon Society, Duck Lake Futures Project, moving facilities previously at the mill, and the Coastal Ecology Camp Supplies, $105,063.93. City of Powell River Public Library, reflective film on library windows, $12,750. Powell River Villa Soccer and Powell River Youth Soccer Clubs, team travel bus, $160,000. Community resource maintained by School District 47. Texada Island Dragon Boat Club purchased new dragon boat for $23,734.17. Club Bon Aquil de Powell River playground upgrades, $6,847.59. And Town Site Heritage Society Henderson House renovations, $47,003.97. Inclusion Powell River Arc Community Center kitchen upgrade, $138,619.10. Yoke-Over Harbor Authority, construction of new Harbor Authority office, $60,000. And the Myrtle Pond Golf Club driving range net replacement and T-deck resurfacing, $128,500, subject to approval of matching funds from the provincial gaming grant. And if there's a seconder, I'll talk about that a little bit.
We have a seconder, Councillor Palm, seconded. Councillor Doudt.
And I want to say thank you to the Community Forest Board. Some of them are here tonight for the work they do, actually harvesting the resources of our community forest and turning over a dividend to the City of Powell River, to all of these organizations that I've just named this year and for years in the past, truly harvesting a dividend of the natural resources surrounding us and doing a favor for all of these many organizations in the city. The Community Forest Board itself is a collection of community members providing their time to make decisions. And all of these other individual groups that are getting grants tonight are filled with volunteers and people contributing and adding to the benefit and the value of all of these dollars and making our community a place to be admired among communities in British Columbia. So I want to thank everybody involved in the community forest. Thank everybody involved in volunteering for each one of the organizations. And I know there were more applicants than are being approved tonight, but people keep working at it and keep trying to meet the goals of the community forest and the rules that you have for providing those grants. And as much as can be done will be done. So thank you to everybody, and I urge council to accept this motion so we can move those dollars around the community and get them working.
All in favor of the motion?
Comments?
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Mayor. So like Councillor Doudt, I do really appreciate the board. For those who aren't familiar, the board has kind of a dual role. They are stewarding the community forests and also stewarding donations to the community. And in what I've learned so far on my time on council, they do a really great job, time consuming, but also thoughtful, of really working with grant applicants, doing negotiation to find out how we can distribute funds throughout our community to meet everyone's needs. And they also hold those groups accountable, including the city, to make sure that we spend things in a timely manner. And I thank them for that. So I have a concern, and this is not a concern for the Community Forest Board, because I think that they do great work in the context of the policies and bylaws that govern them. But given the pressing times that we are in, ultimately the Community Forest Dividend Fund is in a reserve fund that's governed by the city, and these are city dollars. And they're part of the overall funding that we have to support residents. And given the challenging, uncertain times, I think that some of these choices aren't strategic. Some of these are large chunks of money that if they came to the city as part of our grants and aid process, I don't think we would choose. And so, these are recommendations from the board based on the applications that they received and the bylaws that govern them. But and so again, this is not a critique of the Community Foundation Board, but there's a few that I would not necessarily remove forever, but I think this is part of what I mentioned earlier, part of a bigger consideration of how city funds get distributed to community organizations to meet the needs of our time. And so.
Point of order, Mayor, point of order. I
Thank
don't
you.
believe this is the time to discuss personal views on our community forest in light of the recipients that are in the gallery tonight. And I think this discussion needs to wait for another day. And sorry to cut you off.
Thank you, Councillor Baum.
I've never seen anything like it. You've been on council for how long? 5-6 months?
And now I'm going to say
In years.
point of order. I think the point has been made, and I would suggest that we end the presentation by Councillor Isaacson, and I believe Councillor Elliott, did you have your hand up?
Your sound's not.
Muted. I guess not.
Sorry,
can
I'm unmuted. Oh. Am I?
Just kind of a point of clarification. Did you sustain the point of order? So am I asked to stop talking?
Well, I think the point of order indicated that your comments were not relative to the motion at hand, and that you were probably talking on subjects that would be better dealt with at a subsequent meeting. So.
I mean, this is what we're here to talk about. It's hard and messy, but we're here to talk about the recommendations from the community forest. I feel like that's what we're here to do.
I'm going to refer to our CO for comment.
Thank you, Worship. As chair, you've made a decision that you wish to move the conversation along, and that the comments made by Councillor Isaacson are not germane to the main motion. However, it appears that there's also some conflict there. So if someone wants to challenge the chair on that decision, then you would need a mover and a seconder to do so. Otherwise, your position is sustained.
Thank you. Councillor Almeida.
I believe when we decided a few weeks ago to adjust our schedule to remove last week's committee of the whole meeting and council meeting and adjust it to a more in-depth meeting today, this particular topic came up within our group. And part of the discussion that came up was what would happen if council had some disagreements on some of the matters regarding community forest. And our CAO had suggested that, and I agreed with that suggestion, that more discussion needs to happen at council meetings because that's where council debates, discusses, and decides on things. Councillor Isaacson's stating an opinion. Not everyone has to agree with that opinion, but as an elected official, she has that right to state that opinion. And there have been other councillors at this table that have stated opinions that other councillors have not been in agreement with, but they've been given the opportunity to state that opinion.
Thank you. I just make the point that Councillor Isaacson did state it a number of times. And I think having stated her position once, that was sufficient, and it provided the opportunity that our CAO indicated would be provided to all councillors. I believe that Councillor Southcott and then Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Worship. Speaking to the point of order, unless that was what Councillor Elliott wanted to address. So I will continue, or sorry.
I thought I was recognized at one point and somehow am not anymore, but Anyway, I don't mind waiting. Go ahead, Councillor Selcott.
Thank you. Just a tiny bit of what I believe is relevant history. Between about 3 and I believe 5 years ago, or my time frame could be wrong, there was a committee convened to review grants and aid, the community forest grants, permissive tax exemptions. Mr. Hemphill sat on that committee and offered great value. It was a long and hard-working committee, and the result was what I view as significant changes to the way community forest money is utilized for the benefit of this community. I believe Councillor Isaacson's assertion in terms of what the motion is right here is truly a policy question that should be addressed in terms of the policy, and that is the community forest bylaw. So I support your motion, Your Worship, and I would also support, again, re-examining that bylaw in whatever way we find appropriate as we discuss this in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Doudt.
Excuse me.
We have a I've had my hand up for quite a long time. Councillor Elias has also had her hand up for a while in different places. It's getting a little confusing. I'd like to simply make a comment. Okay, I made a motion that was seconded that all of the listed community forest grant recommendations be approved. That was seconded. We were debating that. Councillor Elliott spoke about some concerns.
I have not spoken yet.
Councillor Isaacson had some general concerns and some without specifically mentioning anything. Council is in the midst, we aren't finished, but we're in the midst of changing our procedures. And one of those procedures was to eliminate community closed committee or open committee of the whole meetings, where we would discuss items like this before we came to a council meeting. We have eliminated that committee of the whole meeting where these would have previously been discussed and decided we would make decisions on them at the council meeting. Right now, I think the proper course is if anybody disagrees with the inclusion of anything, they could make a motion to amend the motion by removing one or adding another one and see if council supports or doesn't support that. I personally agree with passing the motion as it is. Future changes to the community forest are a totally different subject, and if we're thinking, we will take some time before we make any decisions on changing the rules of the community forest. I would say if we want to do that, that's for another day.
Thank you, Councillor Doudt. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Your Worship. I am in support of the motion as it is. I also am not agreeing that Councillor Isaacson was out of line in speaking to this motion. Had she been able to continue, it's possible she would have identified a particular piece of the motion that she wanted changed, but she was cut off from doing so. So I do not think she was out of order. I think she was putting context to a point that she never got to get to. And it is the correct place to do that when you're debating a motion. And so I'm not in agreement that she was, that there was a point of order to be had there. She was speaking to the motion. It's possible the solution is more of a policy question, but as Councillor Doudt pointed out, she may have had a particular piece that she wanted to speak to. I'm not sure because she was not allowed to continue. Thanks.
We have a motion on the floor.
Just want to
Councillor Palm.
note, Your Worship. I want to thank Councillor Doudt for pointing out the changes to our policies and our meeting schedules, where we don't get to hash things out at committee of the whole, and they come straight to this meeting now, and it's kind of caught me off guard. Not the usual way we do business. And Councillor Isaacson is correct. She does have the right to challenge the motion on the floor. However, I would encourage that maybe there's a better way to do this instead of with the changes that are before us, doing it the first night out. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay.
Oh, and I will say, after $25 million the last 15 years that have come through our community forest, this community would not be anywhere in the kind of shape that it is in today if it wasn't for the fine work of our community forest board.
Thank you. Councillor Almeida.
I would just like to give Councillor Isaacson the opportunity to finish her statement if she chooses to bring forth anything that would impact the decision we're about to make.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I know this is where we're clunky, right? This is what our CAO shared in our last meetings, that as we shift to bringing up the meat of the discussion at council meetings, it means that our disagreements are more public. So I'll make move an amendment, and if it doesn't get seconded or move on, that's okay. So I will move that that 3 items be removed for consideration at this time, could be considered in the future. The Texade Island Dragon Boat Club, the Oakover Harbor Authority, and Myrtle Point Golf Club, given that they're more regional district items. And that's my, I'll move that.
I'll second and would like to hear Councillor Isaacson's reasoning.
Any discussion before we vote on the Councillor Palm?
Yeah, I'll just point out one important point in terms of the Myrtle Point Golf Club. You note that in the different type of lettering here, subject to approval of matching funds for provincial gaming grant. That's very important to the Community Forest Board because they're always looking for organizations to reach out and match the funds that they provide, which doubles the price tag. So I thank them for making everyone aware of those contributions. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion. All in favor?
I was going to speak to the motion.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I appreciate Councillor Isaacson bringing attention to the things that she's concerned about and making.
I'm sorry, having difficulty hearing you.
Oh, okay. Yep. I'll try to be clearer. I appreciate Councillor Isaacson bringing this forward as a discussion topic and making the motion. I think that that I do not support the motion at this time. I think if we would like to provide direction to our Community Forest Board as far as our preferences for these types of things, that it ought to be put out ahead of time in some type of policy as far as what council wishes the board to consider. And it is not preferable for us to be second guessing the board's recommendations without having provided previous guidelines for them to provide recommendations. And I know they are recommendations and we do have the purview to accept or deny them. And I'm not entirely sure I understand how these 3 are different than say the Cathette Parks Wilderness Society or some other ones that are not directly within the city, and we don't have proper policy to guide that decision. And I'm going to support the recommendations of the Community Forest Board and put the onus back on council to come back with policy ahead of time so that the Community Forest Board can operate within that policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Isaacson.
Just to speak to the amendment. So in doing this, it is what Councillor Elliott is talking about. It is about where I see opportunities to reassess the policies. I don't totally understand them. They're not, I mean, and so again, I do not this is not at fault of the Community Forest Board at all. They are working within their purview, and they've given us great recommendations based on existing policy. But as a new council, we have the responsibility to make decisions in the best interest of our community and in a timely manner. And so these are three that total over close to $200,000. That's a lot of money. And if other applications came forward for a fall release, I would love to see, I think either we give them different direction, or perhaps these are approved. But to me, these were three that stood out for me as possibilities to consider that money for other purposes in the fall. And you know, given the strategic challenges that our community faces, I had some second guesses on some of these. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. All in favor of the amended motion? Opposed? The amended motion is defeated. We'll now move to the motion that was on the floor originally. All in favor? Opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you.
Hey,
sorry,
small
Councillor Southcott.
Yeah, I just want to recognize the substantial value this community has received on a volunteer basis from the Community Forest Board, who bring long expertise and experience that would cost any corporation an awful lot of money. And I just have a profound sense of appreciation for what's been provided by many of these people for many, many years, some right back to the very beginning of this organization, and huge appreciation for the benefits that have accrued to this community, particularly increasingly leveraging money from senior governments. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Doat.
I just, this is the first time for some of us who, Councillor Palm's been here and Councillor Southcott's been on this council for an awful lot longer than I have, but I've been involved long enough to have seen quite a few of these announcements about community forest grants going out to the community. And one of the things about the changes of our procedure is it's given a very narrow time frame for community groups to come out, because I remember council meetings where we've come out and we've had a symbolic check to support. The news media has been here, and we've had the volunteers from all of the various groups that are receiving grants come out to council. And to me, that's been an exciting highlight of the year, to see all of these community people that are involved in doing things directly for their neighbors in the community come out and get some appreciation and get some public attention. And I wonder if staff has a plan about how the funds are going to be distributed this year, because I would like to see an appreciation of all the volunteers who do the work that really makes the difference from this money.
Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Worship. So now that we have approval, yes, we do have approval. Had to double check the minutes. Mallory, our CFO, Mallory Dennison, will be providing all the documentation to the different parties. And at the next council meeting, July 13th, that'll be the time when the big check comes out. So there'll be an opportunity for announcements, and for any members who are recipients who wish to provide comment to council, that'll be the opportunity to do so.
Thank you. Okay, moving now to item 8.2. Development variance permit.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. I'm here tonight to present the next three reports to you. I'm going to start with the development variance permit application 277, proposed for a property in the neighborhood of Wildwood, located at 6488 King Avenue. The applicant wishes to construct a new carriage house, and this is an RA1 zoned property. It measures just over half an acre in size. It has an existing home built in the 50s, and the footprint of that home is about 850 square feet. So as you can see on the image, which is Appendix B to your staff report, it's a large, relatively undeveloped piece of land with one single family home. The proposal is to build the living space of the carriage house above an over height garage. The applicant will be removing an older detached garage on the north side of the property. And again, you can see that on the screen, and I don't think I can, can't point it to you there, but there will be the removal of an existing garage. The carriage house, as proposed, meets all other zoning bylaw requirements, as well as the development permit requirements intended to achieve subordinacy, as well as to be an attractive, cohesive private infill with minimal impact to the existing neighborhood. Those are all priorities of carriage house, the carriage house initiative, which in planning we refer to as invisible density. How do we add another dwelling unit into a neighborhood with minimal impact? The outdoor living space for the carriage house proposed is to face into the interior of the rear yard, with only a small set of minimal windows proposed to face into other areas, other yard areas, as a way to minimize the overlook from one property into another. Attached to the report as Appendix D is a series of site photos that planning staff took on a site visit prior to preparing this report. Photos reflect a large open building space in the rear yard with expansive areas for development. There's high fences, mature trees, which all provide a buffer between this carriage house and the neighboring properties. Staff are supportive of council considering this variance after the notice period, which is a notice that would be mailed to property owners within 61 meters of the boundary of the subject property. And there was a member of council kind enough to share with our CAO some questions that they might have in regards to this development. And one of them was along the lines of, and please correct me if I'm not getting this right, but considering that council has adopted recent changes to our carriage house requirements, is this something we missed? Are we going to see more of these overheight buildings? And should we revisit, the existing carriage house development guidelines and zoning bylaw requirements? Or is this more of a one-off or a unique proposal? And should we still go through the process to evaluate this on a case-by-case? And staff lean towards that latter component, that one of the things we heard loud and clear when we went out for carriage house initially, as well as the second time we went out to engage the public, was we're a view community, and an accessory building that exceeds that maximum height requirement of 5.5 meters could dramatically impact someone's view. And so I think this was a good example of where on this property, a variance that would allow this building to go up to 8.5 meters, so 3 meters beyond the allowable height as is. It's likely that there's minimal impact. The notice period would be an opportunity for anybody that feels impacted to come prepared to speak to that at a future council meeting. So staff are asking for direction to issue notice to begin this process.
Thank you. Do we have any questions, Councillor Doudt?
This is maybe a little bit peripheral to the topic, but when I look at Appendix C, and there's a drawing there of the property with the dotted line with an excavated hole, and directly to the north of that, there's marked out on the drawing a space for a road. And when I look at the aerial photograph, it doesn't look like there's a road anywhere near there. But I see on the drawing of the lot next door that there's a space set aside for a road. So is that a future development idea that existed sometime in the area of Wildwood sometime in the past and has been given up on in the future? Or, because if that road was extended, if it was supposed to be a laneway or an alley between King and the next street to the east, then it would go right through where the building is going to be. So can you tell us a little bit more about how that road came to be or how it came not to be?
Absolutely, through the chair. So what you're referring to is road dedication that would have been taken at time of subdivision, very likely of the property that fronts onto King, and then Seaton, I believe, is the one on the other side. I could be wrong on that, but an approving officer at the time decided to take road dedication, imagining that one day there would be a road through. And you see a number of these in Wildwood, specifically Wildwood. But I'll point out one of the challenging things is that a future approving officer decided to allow a subdivision of these lots here that front onto Lois. I believe that's what's there. Essentially crushing the idea that a road would go through there. Now, that's not to say that a road couldn't come from, Joncas does it. That's not Joncas at that point. I mean, I wish I had a bigger map to look at to see all my names. In this case, subdivision is the mechanism in which you can require road dedication. There is no mechanism here, and there's not an ability for the city to not permit the development of their property in the way that they want to.
That's a mystery for the future.
Likely a situation where that road dedication will be reviewed at some point and say, does the city actually need it? And would we go back to the existing landowners and find a way to dispose of it?
Because that's my idea. They may want the space at some future time. And Councillor Southcott is showing me an extension of the map that shows that road allowance is only for the width of one lot. So anyway, that's good. And I just will say that I've driven by there, and to me, it doesn't look like even a carriage house with an additional height on it would be an impediment to anybody's view or cause any overlooking situations or anything. And I'd be happy to support the motion whenever it happens.
Thank you. Any additional comments, Councillor Almeida?
I just wanted a clarification. You had mentioned about the impact this might have to the bylaws that we just made a change to, but I believe our current carriage house bylaws implicate that a carriage home has to be connected to a road or laneway. Am I mistaken on that?
Through the chair, that is correct. You're mistaken on that, if that's appropriate to say. There is no requirement that it be connected to a road. Unlike other communities that have very specific language about laneway houses, we're actually quite broad in our definition. So carriage house is a garden suite above a garage, beside a garage. So we're quite broad in our definition.
Okay, we have Councillor Palm.
Just one other point of clarification, just for anybody that may be tuning in that lives anywhere within, was it 60 meters? Well, the mail out is going?
61 meters, yes.
So there is no public hearing because this is not a rezoned situation. It's just the building of a carriage house. So if anybody living in that area has some problems, they write a letter to you.
Through the chair, there's some instructions on the notice on how they can connect with us and get information. There's also an opportunity for anybody that has concerns to come out to that meeting where consideration of issuance, and they would be given an opportunity to speak to their concern.
Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it.
Councillor Isaacson.
Yeah, I think I'll make the motion that staff be directed to give notice in accordance with Section 499 of the Local Government Act of Council's intention to consider issuance of Development Variance Permit 277 for 6488 King Avenue, legally described as Lot A, Block 7, District Lot 4900, Group 1, New Westminster, District Plan 5692, PID 011-095, 369 to vary City of Powell River zoning bylaw 2100-2006 by relaxing the maximum permitted accessory building height from 5.5 meters to 8.5 meters to facilitate a new construction carriage house.
Seconded, I believe, by Councillor Elliott.
Yes.
Thank you. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 8.3, Iguana's Mexican Grill.
Thank you again. This is a referral from the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. It's in relationship to Iguana's Mexican Grill, who hold a food primary license through the LCRB. I'm going to use that acronym, if that abbreviation, sorry, acronym. Yeah. The owner is hoping to expand the special event and entertainment options it provides to patrons. They're looking to add a patron participation endorsement on their license, allowing dancing and other guest interaction with performers. Maybe it's helpful for me to give you an understanding of what this particular business is interested in doing. They wouldn't be limited to this, but they're interested in bringing a mariachi band in on Cinco de Mayo and other times where they might offer some dancing for their patrons. Now, I will provide some comfort that food services to remain the primary focus, and the license is to remain unchanged. The patron participation activities will occur within an enclosed dining area and not on the outside patio. It's also might be helpful for you to understand that all patrons would have a seat when they arrive. It's not standing room only. So it is really based around restaurants' desire to continue serving food, but just having a few extras that might draw some patrons out. The LCRB regulates liquor service and issuance of food primary licenses. These are not referred to the city. However, a patron participation endorsement is referred to a local government, and the city has two options. First is to opt out of comment altogether and leave the public consultation up to the LCRB as part of their consideration of the application. Or we can opt into comment, which means the city undertakes engagement with the public in addition to any consultation requirements that the LCRB still has. Staff takes the position that as liquor service is regulated by the province, the city should opt out of comment and leave the LCRB to undertake the appropriate consultation. Again, I will provide some background. Council has routinely opted out of this type of comment on LCRB referrals. And one last point to rest your minds, so that the use on the property is compliant with the location, zoning, and parking requirements. So staff are supportive of, in this case, opting out of comment for this particular application.
Thank you. Any questions before we have somebody put forward the required motion based on the recommendation? Councillor Isaacson.
Yeah, I'll move that council opt out of providing comment on the LCRB structural change application by Iguana's Mexican Grill located at number 14, 4312 Franklin Avenue, Powell River, to add a patron participation endorsement to its existing food primary liquor license.
Seconded by Councillor Southcott. Any Councillor Doubt?
No, I just still thinking about this, but I just want to point out that simply because we opt out of making a comment on this application doesn't mean that council won't be drawn into a discussion about the effects of the decision at some point. And I would bring up the issue of the Wildwood Pub and their license and the various issues that arose in the neighborhood from the music that was playing there when they were open, and the complaints to the bylaws department and delegations to council that came out of that. I'm not sure that a public consultation beforehand would have made any difference to the outcome, but I think we should be aware of that situation if we decide to let the Liquor Control Board be the decision maker. But that the issues still might come to council depending on how the neighborhood feels about the level of noise that they see or they feel after the approval happens.
Councillor Palm, and then
Councillor Dell brings up an important point through the chair, and that is, do we know, I know down below most of the businesses that are in close proximity in that parking lot are day operations, and I'm assuming this live music would be in the evenings, not really affecting the businesses while they're in business hours. I don't know about the upstairs of the building, but do you have any idea whether they are daytime or nighttime operations?
Through the chair, I just in my own personal experience, the vast majority of them are businesses are at least open during the day, and I don't know if they offer services in the evenings as well.
That's why I'm going to support this at this period of time.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm comfortable, I think I'm comfortable supporting opting out of consultation. We've done it a lot in the past. It seems a bit of a duplication to have the city and the liquor board doing community consultation, both. But I do have a question. So my question is, we opt out of the consultation, we see the results of the liquor board consultation when they do it. Is there an avenue for the city to provide either support or non-support once the consultation is done?
Through the chair, that's a great question, and I'm trying to envision a situation where the LCRB does consultation. And I correct me if I'm wrong, I think Councillor Elliott, you're suggesting that the city became aware of a component of the consultation and took issue with that. Is that what you're suggesting?
So I guess I'm just wondering, does the city provide an opinion to the decision that the liquor board makes, and if we opt out of consultation process of our own?
Through the chair, the opportunity is now to decide whether we're going to opt in or opt out. Once we've opted out, I would suggest that that was our opportunity to provide comment. The LCRB is again the regulator. We've been referred a comment. If we opt in, the city does engagement and we provide a comment to the LCRB, and they may still have engagement requirements that they do after that, and then make a decision as to whether issue it or not. It is the LCRB that is the regulator. They will decide whether or not the patron participation endorsement is issued, but that would be the opt-in situation. That's where the city has some leverage by way of providing a comment. Opting out is...
Go ahead, Councillor Elliott.
Oh, I thank you for the answer to my question. I appreciate it. In this case, I'm still comfortable opting out. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any additional questions before we move the motion? All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. 8.5. Statement of Councillor Doudt.
Did the planner want to make a presentation? Oh, go ahead. I won't interrupt you.
Yes, this is a staff report that is in regards to proposed bylaw amendments related to childcare facilities in our region. Bit of background here: the Union of BC Municipalities (UBCM) funded a process to develop a comprehensive study of current and future childcare needs in Cathet in 2019. This was the region-wide childcare planning project report, and it was attached to your report just as a reminder. It resulted in recommendations for the city, such as amendments to the zoning bylaw to facilitate the development of more childcare spaces. The purpose of this report is to seek council direction to begin this work, specifically to proceed with draft amendments to the zoning bylaw that aim to eliminate barriers and encourage the creation of more childcare spaces in the city. We get the direction to begin this work, we would return to you with a draft amendment bylaw. So this is really just to identify that this is in this plan. Got the plan here with me today. This was a recommendation that came forward in 2019. A busy 4 years since then, and perhaps there's reasons why we didn't get on it immediately, but we now would like to pick this up and begin working on these amendments that arguably have some impact to the development of childcare spaces. Just to give you a sense as to the scope of some of the changes, an amendment bylaw would likely include a better description of the differences between home-based childcare and purpose-built childcare facilities. Permission for childcare facilities to be located in most residential, multifamily, commercial, and institutional zones, and removal of the size restrictions on childcare facilities, as caps on a number of children would be are already set through provincial licensing processes. Again, we're looking for your direction to begin this work. Today, I don't have a draft amendment bylaw. I'm just looking to be able to begin this work.
Thank you. I know that the last 7 months, I've certainly had a number of people point out that Powell River is badly in need of additional childcare facilities. So just open this up for questions. Councillor Doubt.
I was just going to jump right to the motion, and we could probably include any questions if it comes to that. But
Thank you.
I'll move that staff be directed to prepare amendments to the City of Powell River zoning bylaw to facilitate the creation of more childcare spaces. And if there's a seconder, I'll speak to it a little
I
bit.
saw Councillor Elliott has seconded that motion.
Well, I've read through the childcare report that was created by the social planner when they were here just a short time ago, and it recommends a couple of things really to focus what I looked through it and to see what was being recommended was things to do to create more childcare spaces, create new spaces, and I think I know for sure because I keep getting calls from my relatives saying, "Can you take care of the grandkids?" Because childcare isn't available, and I am a little bit more available than childcare. But the recommendation is bylaw changes to the city bylaws. They recommend actually in the report on page 76 two different bylaws. One is the city zoning bylaw, and the other one is the business licensing bylaw. And I think both of those actually need to be reviewed to make childcare spaces more available. And they go into detail in the report of exactly how to do this. And in the report, there was a really good quotation that says that a thorough bylaw review with access to childcare and the creation of new spaces in mind is an immediate and effective way to support a region-wide childcare plan that is not resource heavy or reliant on the provincial or federal government for support. So those are things we can do locally, and I think we should do to make childcare more effective. And in the report, I want to point out, I see some other things, a discussion about region-wide programs, which suggests partnerships with the Cassette Regional District, partnerships with the school district, and possibly even partnership with seniors organizations. These are all things that require a plan beyond what council can do by itself. We had a social planner to do this before. We don't right now, and I'll be talking about both regional representation and the social planner probably later tonight. But I would like to see these bylaws and enablements go ahead, and I'd like to actually include the business licensing bylaw in the review we're making a motion for.
So just to be clear, you're amending the motion to include.
I don't know if it's legal for me to amend my own motion, but I would like to amend it to include the business licensing bylaw adjustments.
I think Mr. Jackson has agreed that you can do that.
Well, I'd suggest an amendment motion, actually.
Okay.
Sorry.
Would you read the amended motion put forward by Councillor Doubt?
I could read it again if you like. To include adjustment of the business licensing bylaw.
I'll second the amendment.
Great. All in favor of the amended motion? Passed unanimously. And for the motion, all in favor?
I just think there's
Sorry, I wanted to speak to it.
discussion.
Oh, sorry, Councillor, I thought you were already voting again. Please.
Well, no, I've had my hand up since the motion to also speak to the motion, and I'm also in favor of the amendment. But what I wanted to say is I'm very much in favor of moving forward with recommendations made through that prior process. I'm really happy to see this come forward in our agenda. I support it. I also sat in a regional consultation just a few days ago session for the provincial government is changing their guidelines for the funding that is to build childcare spaces, and they didn't get the uptick they thought they would on the first round, and there's they're changing eligibility to make it a little better. So I'd like to definitely move forward on anything we can do to encourage on our end. Municipalities are eligible to get 100% funding. They're going to be providing more funding for a lot of the planning and stuff that they didn't do before, and they're hoping to get more uptake. I would looking forward to trying to get some childcare spaces built in our community. I have ideas about that, and so I appreciate very much this coming forward.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Mayor. A bit of a question. These are items that are pretty straightforward to do. We help create the conditions for more childcare spaces, but as Councillor Doubt and Councillor Elliott referred to, there are some kind of heavier recommendations that would require more work and resources. So it's my presumption that in order to move any further on those types of things, you would need further direction, for example, through a strategic plan or, a further motion to do some of the more substantial stuff. Is that correct?
Through the chair, absolutely, that's correct. I think there's likely a conversation that needs to be had by council about what role the city municipality is going to have in the delivery of childcare. And currently, while I appreciate the provincial government and their funding opportunity, there's a reason why the uptake hasn't been strong. Mm-hmm. And it's not actually addressing some of the systemic issues that plague our childcare system. It's not a physical space issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion, the original motion on the floor now. Mr. Jackson?
As amended, Your Worship, yes.
As amended. Thank you. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. We will now move to item 8.5. Statement of financial information.
Good evening. So the purpose of this report is to obtain council's approval for submission of the city's 2022 Statement of Financial Information to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. The Financial Information Act requires municipalities to prepare a Statement of Financial Information, which is commonly referred to as the SOFI report, to be filed with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs by June 30th of each year. The requirements of the SOFI report are set out in the Financial Information Regulations, which is enacted pursuant to the Financial Information Act. The report must be approved by the CFO and council before being submitted to the ministry. The SOFI report contains information such as the Consolidated Statement of Financial Information, or the Consolidated Financial Statements, and the Schedule of Remuneration and Expenses, which lists all of the remuneration and expenses for elected officials, as well as for city staff who have earned $75,000 or more during the year. The employee expenses include items specific to employees, like training and professional dues. The Schedule of Suppliers of Goods and Services lists suppliers who have been paid by the city for $25,000 or more during the year. It's worth noting that the presentation of the city's financial statements and the SOFI report are slightly different. The financial statements are presented in accordance with public sector accounting standards, which is an accrual basis form of accounting, whereas the SOFI report is presented in accordance with the Financial Information Regulations, which requires a cash basis for accounting. So to summarize, I'm requesting that the 2022 SOFI report be approved for submission to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and that the Mayor and CFO be authorized to sign the SOFI approval form.
Thank you. We have a recommendation. Sorry, Councillor Elliott.
I was just going to move that recommendation. Do I need to read it, or is it okay to just say I move that recommendation?
Mr. Jackson, should it be read, or is it sufficient to have it?
I'd suggest that it be read in full, please.
Councillor Elliott, would you read it, please?
I move that the City of Powell River's 2022 Statement of Financial Information attached as Appendix A to the report dated June 22nd, 2023 from the Manager of Financial Services be approved for submission to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, and that the Mayor and Chief Financial Officer be authorized to sign the Statement of Financial Information approval form.
seconded by Councillor Southcott. Any questions? See no questions. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Next item, 8.6, amendment to Powell River Academy of Music Contribution Agreement.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good to be in front of you again tonight, Council. I'm here tonight to talk to you about a request that the city has received from the Powell River Academy of Music regarding its contribution agreement that was entered into in December 2015 and commenced on January 1st, 2016. The request is in regards to the grant in kind that is provided through that agreement, which is part of Section 4, A, B, and C. Or sorry, Section 4B is the actual portion of the agreement that it's referring to. This is they've asked for a change to reflect the changes in fees that we've charged over the years. They have increased since we entered into this agreement in 2016, and so they've asked us to make some slight amendments. Currently, the agreement allows for an annual grant in kind for the use of city facilities, having a value up to $25,000 for the Cathalmu International Choral Festival or such other events as the city deems appropriate. What's been proposed to change, and you can see in the amendment agreement that's been in front of you, is to change that section to reflect the changes in and not only use, but the fees that we've been charging. An annual grant in kind for use of city facilities having a value of up to $40,000 in years that the festival is held, and a value of up to $10,000 in years that the Cathalmu Festival is not held. And this takes into account that Cathalmu actually does run programming in off years. So it's they have their main festival one year, and the next year they actually do have other programming that runs, and they make use of city facilities during those years, but not as heavy as they would during the festival. So you can see in the financial impact section, our Chief Financial Officer has given you a breakdown of how the grant in kind has been would normally be applied, $25,000 per year. In this case, it's $40,000 in the year of the festival, $10,000 in the off year. Basically, an equal value of what's already being paid out. It turns out to be a neutral financial impact over the 2-year period. So the recommendation at this point in time is to approve the amendment to the agreement.
Do we have a motion? Councillor Isaacson.
Yes, I'll move that council approve an amendment to the contribution agreement with the Powell River Academy of Music as presented. And if it's seconded, I can speak very briefly to it.
Okay. Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you. I mean, I think this is there's a neutral financial impact over 2 years, given the total is still $50,000 over a couple-year period. And it also is an in-kind contribution that they're looking for an adjustment on. And so the increase only reflects the money that we would charge if we were renting those things out. And so this is an easy yes for me.
Any other comments before we move the motion? All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Item 8.7, City of Powell River 2022 Annual Report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So last time I was in front of you, we presented the draft annual report, and it was moved to bring it to the next council meeting, which is tonight. We allowed for basically what was meant to be a 2-week period, but to change the meeting schedule. So they got a 3-week period for the public to review the draft annual report. We did receive a lot of input, but it all came from internal. So not only from council members, but from staff. So you can see I've listed the amendments that have been made in regards to the content of the report. I can review those in detail if you would like. We've also, Councillor Armida, I will mention, sent me some layout issues last night, which we will fix. So I'm going to call them eagle eyes. So thank you. We have noted in there actually those changes are being made in regards to the layout and graphic design issues that were left over that didn't quite get fixed. But anyways, you can see the changes that are there. So I present to you what will hopefully be the final draft of the 2022 annual report for approval.
By Councillor Southcott. By Councillor Almeida.
I think our corporate officer wants the motion read.
Please.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Would you
I
read
move-
the motion?
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that the revised draft City of Powell River 2022 annual report included in the June 22nd, 2023 council agenda package be adopted.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Almeida. Do we have any questions on the motion? Councillor Isaacson.
Maybe you were already planning this, Your Worship, but before we do this final vote, I wanted to acknowledge that this is the last presentation that Mr. Randolph will be doing towards council. He's accepted a role as Chief Administrative Officer in Petawawa, Ontario, and it will be closer to family. And I'll kick things off by thanking him for his service. And I feel like the vote will be both ceremonial and official. But been great to get to know you in the brief time I've been on council, and congratulate you in your next step. And thanks for your service.
Thank you.
Councillor Doudt.
What am I going to say? I know where you're going, but I don't. Not sure that's been publicly announced yet. So.
Oh, it has. Believe me,
Oh,
through the chair, there's been media releases on out of Petawawa at least.
After the city of Petawawa, and I just they're in the news the last few days with the nearby garrison Petawawa losing a couple of service members in a helicopter crash there. So, you know, that's going to be something to deal with when you get there. But I want to make some comments on the annual report, if that's okay. And I talked about this briefly last time, but I want to talk about it in more detail right now. One of the significant things that I mentioned is that this report is using the strategic plan from the council elected in 2018. And it's still using the last term's documents. It's still not done. And then most councils will target doing that in November of the year they're elected, within a couple of months of election time. And it's moving further out. We still have dates moving out to create a new strategic plan. In the meantime, events are overtaking us. There's old and new issues that are waiting for us to pay attention to. Housing is one of the big ones in my mind. There's a building and zoning bylaw rewrite, which I was reading today, could be covered under the CMHC's housing acceleration funding. The city of Halifax, I read a great report from that city today, who are instructing their staff to apply for that grant that they could use to deal with the forest fires that have happened there just recently, and do that applying by the end of June. That accelerated fund application has a deadline, and it's only open for 45 days. I don't know when it closes, but we're missing out, I think, if we don't get together and make a plan. It's about building more housing faster. There's a $4 billion opportunity, which we could take advantage of if we work at it. We have a housing needs study. All we'd have to do is create a plan and make an application, but we need to have that as a priority for the city, and we haven't set that yet. The Barnett Street affordable housing. Council has looked at that and thought about it. We've asked for partners from the community who might be interested in doing something, but still, we need to move ahead. During the election period, I talked about a housing authority and the creation of a housing authority. I talked to many others who thought about that. We need to move forward on that. The name change was referred to strategic planning. And there's people in the audience who are interested in the name change process and want to have some comments about it, but we just simply haven't dealt with that yet. Reconciliation, and part of reconciliation is having C3 meetings. We haven't sat down as a council and talked about a strategy yet, but we've been invited to a C3 meeting on Monday. Part of the agenda for that meeting is to talk about guidelines, but we haven't had a discussion with among ourselves at council about how we want that to be. It's a question. We're not organized in the way we're doing it. We promised the Citizens Advisory Committee on the North Harbor to get residents involved who are using the North Harbor. We haven't done anything yet. I mean, that's not that hard to do. We had a referendum passed on a replacement fire hall. No action on that. We could use growing community funds for that, possibly. These housing accelerator funds can be used for fire halls. There's possibilities there. And it could have a housing component. So going on, permissive tax exemptions. That was on our agenda tonight. People want to talk about it some more. Council had a plan to go further and consult more with the public on what we're going to do with permissive tax exemptions. It'd be good to have a strategy about how to deal with that.
Point of order.
Yes.
So my point of order is we're talking about the annual report, and I agree with Councillor Doudt. These are all issues, but this isn't germane to the conversation on approving the annual report.
Okay, I would agree with Councillor Isaacson. It would be nice for the public to know everything that we're not doing, but it's not the subject of the motion that's before us. So we'll move on. And does anybody else have any comment on the motion?
So if I could continue. I have other things.
No, Councillor Doudt, you cannot continue.
You're not going to allow me to talk about something else?
Well, if it's related to the motion, you may talk about
It
it.
is related to the motion.
All right, then continue.
So I had lots more to say about that, but I'll go back to the other comment I had to make. And originally, I had suggested that on page, what is that here? Page 7 of the report, we have all the pictures of council members. And we have a list of 6 out of the 7 council members who have portfolios. And there's one who doesn't. So you changed some of the language of roles on council. You removed a role that I had that council had been removed on my motion, but you didn't add the portfolio title.
Oh,
And I'm just commenting on that. I don't know why it's that hard to do, but I'll just stop there.
Okay. Any additional comments before we move the motion?
I have,
Councillor Isaacson.
I'll just propose an amendment. I'll propose 2 amendments to the original motion. One is to add the word portfolio in front of Councillor Doubt's portfolios, and also in front of the strategic plan and priorities on page 9. If there could be like an asterisk that this plan represents the previous council and that the new council is currently working to determine our next strategic priorities.
so through the chair, just how would I put the actual dates that those strategic priorities were for, which I believe was 2019 to 2022. Yeah. And that probably clarifies the issue right there.
Thank you. So before I'll in mid-sentence amend my amendment will be to add the portfolio word and add the dates for the current strategic plan of priorities on page 9.
Seconded by Councillor Almeida. Any further discussion? All in favor of the amended motion? Opposed? So noted. Okay, we now have the motion. Mr. Jackson, would you like to read the motion, or are we fine with council?
So the motion is amended, so it'd be that the revised draft City of Powell River 2022 annual report included in the June 22nd, 2023 council agenda be adopted with 2 additional amendments. The first being on page 7, adding portfolio prior to Councillor Doubt's actual portfolios being held. And on page 9, adding reference that the strategic plan that is in effect for this was 2019 to 2022.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? 2 opposed, I believe. Is that correct, Councillor Elliott? You voted opposing
No,
the motion?
I think there was just a delay in
okay.
what you saw.
Okay, thank you. Okay, 8.7.
Thank you.
Amendment to Council Policy 255, Reserve Funds.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am proposing amendments to Council Reserve Fund Policy 255, simply to keep the policy current. The first change will be proposed is to add a Growing Communities Reserve Fund to the policy. You'll remember in March we received funds from the Growing Community Fund, a provincial fund, and one of the requirements was that these funds be placed in its own reserve fund established by bylaw. So those are the first steps that we took as we proposed the bylaw. It's been adopted. And now that that's completed, I'm simply proposing to update our policy so it mirrors the bylaw. And so that's the first change. And the second one is just an update to the name of a provincial funding program that has been updated. So brief history, there was a Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program. We called it CARIP. And the reserve policy talks about the funds from this program going directly into the Climate Action Reserve Fund. The province has renamed this program to be the Local Government Climate Action Program, LGCAP. And I know we talked about that when this program came online. There's been some slight changes with the program, and it resulted in the city receiving more funds annually, which is positive news. So the update today is simply just to change the name in the reserve policy so that it's current, and reflecting the fact that the funds from LGCAP will then flow into the Climate Action Reserve. With that, I'll turn the floor over to any questions.
Councillor Almeida.
I'll start with the motion. I'll move that council adopt the amended council policy 255, reserve funds attached to the June 22nd, 2023 amendment to council policy 255, reserve funds report.
Seconded by Councillor Southcott. Do we have any questions? Seeing no questions, we will move the motion. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Next item 9 is bylaws. 9.1 is the draft.
We have 8.9 here.
Oh, we have 8.9? Oh, we do. Sorry. How could I forget our municipal directors of the Cathet Regional District? Councillor Doudt.
I think maybe one of the new things that we should change would be having this on the agenda at every meeting. The regional district has a board meeting once a month, and the last one happened at the end of May and has been reported on already. The next one will happen at the end of June.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott.
I think it's fine to have it on every agenda. We can say we have no report. Sometimes it's nice to also just report on, things that may have happened at committee of the whole or some other regional district business. If we have something to say, it's nice when it's on the agenda.
Thank you. Item 9 are bylaws. 9.1 is the draft bylaw 2725, 2023.
Thank you. Yes, I am proposing an amendment to the South Westview Harbor Rates and Regulations bylaw. It's a small procedural change where we are looking to include a rate for electricity for the 100 ampere electricity, $1 per kilowatt hour. So currently the Coast Guard is the only customer that uses the $1 per kilowatt hour for the 100 ampere. But in the last revision of this bylaw, that rate was dropped erroneously. So I'm proposing an amendment to correct for this. And as well, I will note the amended bylaw before you today has a $1 per hour, and it should precisely read $1 per kilowatt hour. So I'd like to put that on the record for consideration, that the amendment bylaw be considered $1 per kilowatt hour. Open up the floor to any questions.
Councillor Isaacson.
Yeah, just a question. We're halfway through the year. What's been happening up until now?
We build them, they're on a quarterly system, so we don't bill them every month, we bill them quarterly. So that's why we'd like to see this bylaw come through so that we could catch up on billing.
We have a motion. Thank Councillor Almeida.
I will attempt to catch the CFO's amendment. So to amend I move to amend the South Westview Harbor Rates and Regulations Bylaw 2718-2022 to add a kilowatt per hour electrical rate provision for 100 ampere service used only by the Coast Guards. Oh, sorry, did I read the wrong one? I did read the wrong one. Okay, my apologies. There we go. I move that the draft South Westview Harbor Rates and Regulations Bylaw 2718 and 2022, Amendment Bylaw 2725-2023 be read a first, second, and third time.
Seconded by many people. Councillor Southcott. Any further discussion before we move the motion? All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Now, we move on. Unfinished business. 10.1 is a proposed UBCM resolution, Section 744 of the Local Government Act. Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Worship. This relates to a resolution that Paul River and I believe Lake Country submitted to the 2021 UBCM. It was passed by the Assembly, sent to the province municipal affairs. Basically, we found after quite a long period of time, just didn't see it as a high enough priority. Both discussions with the senior staffer there and also with the lawyer at MIABC, see no other way to try to elevate this than to resubmit to UBCM. I'm prepared to speak to it on the floor if it's pulled. I expect it would be in an approval block. And I've also requested a meeting with the Minister of Municipal Affairs to back this up. This simply would remove 3 words from the Local Government Act that allows for nuisance suits against municipalities.
We have a mover of the recommended. Councillor Elliott.
I would move the recommendation if Councillor Southcott didn't want to, or I would second, either way.
Okay, could we have it read out? I think, or is that fine?
I'll read it.
Mr. Jackson, we would like it read out.
Oh, I'd be glad to. Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Okay. I move that the following resolution and background information as attached to the June 22nd, 2023 council meeting agenda be submitted for consideration at the 2023 Union of BC Municipalities Convention. The resolution being entitled Inclusion of, oh, wait a sec, I'm reading the wrong one. I apologize. I move that the following resolution and background information as attached to the June 22nd, 2023 council meeting agenda be submitted for consideration at the 2023 Union of British Columbia Municipalities Convention entitled Amendment of Section 744 of the Local Government Act.
We have a motion. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Almeida. Councillor Isaacson.
I have a question. You mentioned, through the chair, you mentioned, Councillor Southcott, that it had been submitted previously. Is this different than what's been submitted previously, or is it the same resolution?
This resolution is slightly different, but similar enough so that they will not be able to confuse it as a new resolution. clearly climate risks are increasing, which increases the importance of this resolution.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship. I recall this motion when it came forward originally. It does represent a significant financial risk to the municipality, and it does put more burden on the municipality than other provinces do. And so I'm in favor of putting it forward again and for the Ministry of Municipal Affairs to hopefully prioritize this.
Thank you. See no additional questions. I'll move the motion. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Item 10.2 is another proposed UBCM resolution. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll read the recommendation first and then speak to it after that. I move that the following resolution and background information as attached to the June 22nd, 2023 Council meeting agenda be submitted for consideration at the 2023 Union of British Columbia Municipalities Convention, titled Inclusion of First Nations in Section 90 of Community Charter.
Seconded by Councillor Almeida. Do we have any questions? Oh, Councillor Elliott.
I just wanted to speak to the motion. So essentially, what this resolution does is it asks the Ministry of Municipal Affairs to amend their legislation to recognize First Nations as a level of government, similarly to the province and federal governments, which are already named in the legislation and recognized, which supports intergovernmental communication on the same level as other governments. Thank you.
Good. See no additional questions, comments. I'll move the motion. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Next item under new business is a draft letter regarding BC Utilities Commission investigation. And it's a letter to the BCUC PREI. Councillor Almeida.
I'll move the motion. I move that the letter attached to the June 22nd, 2023 Council agenda package regarding the BC Utilities Commission investigation, Project 1599415, under Mayor's signature, be submitted to BC Utilities Commission before the June 30th, 2023 deadline.
Second by Councillor Isaacson. Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I am very happy to see this letter coming towards council. When I brought it up at the last council meeting, it was very clear that the timeline was quite short, and I think some concerns that council raised about the legality of this and the complicated nature of this, and I appreciate staff for coming back to us with this and doing work to understand what BC Utilities Commission is asking of us. And it's not to weigh in on the legislation, but instead to speak to public interests and what our city's interests are. And what this letter will do is to indicate to the BC Utilities Commission that how the dams at Lois Lake and at Powell River, but in specifically the city's case, Powell River, might impact us as a city. And this letter speaks to the history of the dam, how it's been used, and how it's been a vital source of supporting economic development in terms of an electrical source for the industrial site, which has formerly been an operational mill, and we are yet to know what's going to be there in the future. But we as a city think that it is important to the future of our public and the economic development opportunities in our city. So I highly support this letter being sent to the BC Utilities Commission.
Thank you. Any additional comments before we move the motion? All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Councillor Elliott, just to be clear, are you abstaining?
I'm in favor. Sorry, I was
Thank
distracted
you.
briefly.
Okay, that passed unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move to questions. Do we have any questions from Mr. Galinsky? Thank you. Do we have any questions from those who have joined us in person? Please come forward, and if you would give us your name and make sure, yeah, thanks.
Yes, thank you. My name is John Keller. I'm the president of the Energy Democracy for BC Society. And on behalf of our organization, I just wanted to express our thanks to Mayor and Council for the motion you just passed to send a letter to the BC Utilities Commission. We believe this is of utmost importance to our community and that we would not be well served for Powder River Energy Inc. to have an exemption to the regulatory body, the Utilities Commission Act. And similarly, as we saw earlier in the context of the community forest, we would like to point to the Columbia Basin Trust model, which currently returns $80 million per annum to the local community. And we would hope that through this process that the desired outcome might be a model like that we could look at for our own community. So again, thank you very much, Mayor and Council, for taking action in this matter.
Thank you very much. Do we have any callers online? Do we have, seen no, oh, just a second, we have another. Thank you for coming forward. You might have to lower that microphone. That's better.
I'm Margaret Hamilton. I live.
I can't hear.
Oh,
You might need to direct the mic.
Better?
Yeah.
That's better. Yes, thank you.
Okay. My name is Margaret Hamilton. I live in Townsite. I've read the draft letter and thank you very much for doing that. 2 questions, and these are things I probably should know but don't. It's my understanding here that the Powder River Energy is would like not to be considered a public utility. You go on to say that BCUC, the Utilities Commission, is not seeking input on that point. So my question is, what is the process? Who is responsible? And how is it done that we discover whether or not they are a public utility? Do we have any input into that process, I guess is really my question.
Do we, is there anybody here?
I can answer it a bit, but.
Our CFO, I think, is most familiar with that, if we can get her to answer.
Thank you. The question is coming behind you. The answer to the question.
Okay. Through the chair, the process is that the BCUC has established I guess I'll give some history. History is helpful. When PREI was providing all of its power to the mill site through a power purchase agreement, the BCUC provided them with an exemption from being regulated because they saw it as not necessary. There was an agreement established and there was cohesion there. No need to regulate. Now that the mill is closed and PREI is exporting power, the BCUC is now reconsidering if an exemption is still applicable, since there's no power purchase agreement and they are selling to the grid. So the BCUC's process now, when they're considering repealing an exemption is to seek input from the community to understand if there's maybe something that they haven't considered when making this decision. So they have an appeal board with 3 appointed people who are going to consider all of the facts of the case, and they welcome input from the community to give our feedback, just so that they have a complete case, a complete amount of information when they're making the decision.
Thank you for that. That makes good sense. One other little question. However the mill site is repurposed, whatever industry moves in there is going to need a secure water supply. It seems to me that the city is hogtied, you know, unless we can control that water supply. And I don't see that directly addressed somewhere. I'm not suggesting an omission. I simply don't understand it, and I would like to.
To Mr. Day.
I'm sorry if my questions are awkward.
Oh, no, that's
Excellent question.
None of us are experts at this. That's what you're seeing.
I guess, yeah, there's no easy answer. So therefore, there must be a process to seek an answer. But who is going to want to set up any kind of industry there if they don't have a secure water supply?
okay. I think we have at least 3 councillors that would like to provide information. I'll start.
Sit down and listen. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We'll start with Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Worship. So my knowledge is that water is a provincial jurisdiction, that kind of water. The water licenses, it's licensed by the province. Both Catalyst and PREI have large water, well, Catalyst not so big, but PREI has a very large water license. So it would be a provincial decision. Please correct me if I'm wrong, anybody?
Councillor Doudt.
My humble opinion, I don't know much, I'm just a city councillor, is that water rights are controlled by the province of British Columbia. They have water rights agreements with the water users, and if you want to have an influence on that, there's an MLA down on Marine Drive, Nicholas Simons, he'd be the guy to talk to. That it's not a City of Fall River issue. I'm sure if we provide them drinking water, which I'm not sure whether we do or not, that would be a city service, but the bulk of the water they used in their processes, and the bulk of the water that's used for electricity generation all comes from the river, and it's BC government water rights, not city water rights.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you.
Let me just
clarify.
Is this has Mr. Simons been approached? Are we asking that question?
I think we'll go to Mr. Day.
Pointed out, the potable water would be supplied by the city through the water system. Our corporate officer has been in contact with the solicitor that drafted this letter. We forwarded 7 different water licenses that are attributable to the mill. So it's not just a simple answer there. It's quite a complex answer.
Thank you. Councillor Isaacson.
One thing though, you mentioned, how does the public have a say? And so the BC Utilities Commission did require PREI to provide notification to a number of governments, local governments, and First Nations governments. And they also are open to comments from the public. So if you go to bcuc.com, there's a button that says get involved, and you can scroll down to submit a letter of comment. And I think I've subscribed to the proceedings to see what sort of documents are getting uploaded. And I want to say there's maybe at least 8 comment letters from the public so far. But the deadline is coming up soon. I think it's June 30th.
Thank you. Any,
Yes.
Councillor? Yes, Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have just a couple of things to say. I did manage to read a water license that was attributable to PREI on Powell Lake, and the terms of that water license indicated that the power generated from that facility with that water license was intended for providing power to the mill. So it's my opinion that the terms of that water license included those provisions, and so that's an excellent thing. I think the provincial government needs to look at that and determine whether it's what the water license is currently being complied with or not. And I believe we should talk to our MLA about that, and I don't think that's been done yet. The second thing was I do believe originally the exemption was not decided by BCUC, but done by order in council that was tied to the power purchase agreement. When the mill closed, as of last, whenever it was, the order in council provisions were no longer in effect. And so that's slightly different. So BC Utilities Commission has not made a determination, but was following an order in council prior to the mill closing.
Thank you. Do we have any additional callers? Oh, Councillor. Oh, no callers.
Not hearing any callers, Your Worship. I have one item that I'd like to address, if I may.
Please.
And that is on our agenda tonight, Councillor Elliott, we passed a resolution to send forward a resolution to UBCM to allow First Nations under Section 90 to hopefully amend our community charter or amend the charter so that we can get together in 3C meetings. And this is a step forward. This was also on the table that I attended at a regional district meeting recently. There were a number of concerns as to a meeting being proposed called 3C, and it's referred to as a private forum, which is taking place next Monday afternoon here in our community. And I want to just say that I believe all of us here at the council table ran on platforms of transparency. Transparency is a very important item. And I don't want anybody being caught off guard when they find out after the fact that the meeting that is being proposed, we all had individual invitations, and all of us are making an individual choice as to whether we attend a meeting in Cohaman next Monday. And it is unfortunate that we are not meeting in public. We are meeting behind closed doors in a private forum. And I believe that forum has an agenda. So it gives council a lot of cause for concern. There are a number of legal questions attached. The CAOs have met to discuss the ramifications around this proposed meeting. And I'd like to call upon Mr. Day to just comment as to how this is going to take place in a legal format and what is proposed during the meeting.
By Cohaman to attend a joint meeting between the city, Cohaman Nation, and Cathet Regional District. We've provided advice previously to council that the council, there's an existing document that was created by the province, the federal government, and UBCM, and is still used today for UBCM funding grants. that outlines the various forums for such meetings. And while the document itself is vague, I would say, it clearly envisions the opportunity for some private discussion. And it indicates that if a decision of council is going to be made, the decision has to be made in council's legitimate form. So that means either in an open council meeting, or if in fact the topic warrants, it can be considered an in-camera meeting in accordance with the statute. And so that document is what's guided communities across British Columbia for almost 20 years. So it's common practice that there's various means of holding these meetings. It happens across the province. But what's important is that council not make a decision until it is in the venue that council is enabled to make decisions. That is an open meeting or a legitimate in-camera meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Day. I think you did an excellent job of providing advice to council, and I'd like to thank Councillor Palm so that bringing it forward so that everybody knows that any issue that may be discussed there will come to our open council meeting so that everybody is aware before a decision is made. So thank you very much. Councillor Doudt.
Yeah, and I introduced the fact that this meeting was happening earlier when I was speaking about things that say earlier. So I have the agenda. It's been circulated to council members. The first thing on the agenda, item number 2 on the agenda, is a proposed 3C discussion and meeting guidelines. And I hope that we can have a thorough discussion on those meeting guidelines at that meeting. And what happens after the discussion on guidelines will guide what I do in that particular event, because I can see what's on the agenda. I think there are many things that could be tempting for people to take a position on, and I think we need to be careful about that.
Thank you.
Follow-up question. Still feeling a little apprehensive about the whole, to tell you the truth, as an individual council, speaking from. That is.
I can't hear you, Jim.
Sorry?
I
You have to
can't
speak
hear
a
you.
little more into them.
I say I'm only speaking for myself, and I still have apprehension about the meeting taking place, going as a individual, because, you have to look at the legal ramifications around this. And I'd like to refer the next question that I have to Mr. Jackson, because I know he's done some research on the legality in terms of our community charter on this gathering and some of the pitfalls or potential pitfalls that could exist, because I think council needs to know about those. And you don't have to elaborate greatly, Mr. Jackson, but I'd certainly appreciate words of wisdom on your research basis.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess one of the key parts is whether or not, because there will be a quorum, so let's set that aside, is the quorum will exist, but it's whether or not the business of council is being conducted. And the clarity with that is that you're not entering into deliberations or discussions amongst yourselves. You're not furthering the business with each other. That was where you hit a pause button and you say, nope, that has to come back to the council table in a public forum or in referred to a legitimate in-camera portion. So as long as you're not having that discussion amongst each other and you're there really to obtain information, it's been referred to before as breaking bread, right? You're getting to know each other. It's an icebreaker. You're also going over to the legislature. It's not being held in chambers. It's not at the RD boardroom. So all those things are factors to consider. But the key part is you're not conducting your business. And when I say that your business is as a quorum, you're not furthering the discussion and you're not making decisions, formulating those decisions. And that's where you self-manage. You make sure that you're not in those situations.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
For clarification, I think it's important to clarify. There is an agenda. Now, This is a gathering you're referring to, private forum. So does that mean this is not a meeting since all of council plans to attend and we have quorum? Doesn't the community charter say that minutes have to be taken of that meeting?
Your worship, that's if you're conducting the business of council. So here's an example. If you find there's a quorum of councillors that just happen to be meeting at, say, Prisma, right? You sit down, there's 5 of you and you're together, well, that's a quorum. Is it a meeting? Well, no. But if you start talking about council business and having a discussion and looking at points of view and changing your mind based on what that councillor said, then you're getting yourself into a bit of trouble there, because that is where the public needs to be able to observe the council proceedings. So just because there's a quorum together doesn't in and of itself mean that that's a meeting. It's if you're conducting that business. And that's where you need to be careful.
So no minutes are required, and each individual councillor is only attending as an individual. Is that correct?
That's what my understanding is, yes.
And would you advise each council member that's here tonight to not deliberate a great deal, but to go and listen?
Certainly, I believe that's the expectation, and council members have all been trained very well, and I think everybody's aware of that.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you. Could we have a motion?
Oh, we don't need one.
I was gonna do the motion. I did want to say one quick thing. I forgot that next week's our first Thursday night market. So we forgot that announcement. So finish on that note. Thursday night markets start June 29th. But with that being said, I will motion to adjourn.
Thanks. Seconded by Councillor Southcott. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you very much.